So today we're talking about two-color brioche knit flat. So I have just finished my two-color Italian cast on, and there's a separate video for that if you need to learn how to do that. And so just want to remind you what I have on here. This first slip knot that's on here, this little double stitch, that one does not count. More often than not, when you do two-color brioche flat, you're going to start with selvage stitches. So you start with one color and end with one color. In our basic intro seedling scarf, our first and last colors are the light colors, so that's what I have here on my needle. And we are going to be discussing, just really quickly before I start showing you how to do this, I just want to cover the terminology with you. So right over here, we have written out some of the basic terms and abbreviations for brioche. So a BRK, or a bark, or a brioche knit is the basic stitch in brioche where you are knitting double stitches together. A BRP is the brioche purl. It's the same thing, but instead of knitting, you're purling. So this is a bark, this is a burp. And then when you are working that single stitch and adding your yarn over, those are referred to, depending on which side you're on, as a yarn forward, slip one, yarn over, or a yarn forward, slip one, yarn over front. So I'm going to be referring to those terms over and over again, and I want to just thank Nancy Marchant for the books that she's been writing on brioche and for really helping to create like a common nomenclature for that. So this is her language, and I'll be using that because she's like the leading authority on brioche at the moment. All right, so back to the knitting. Okay, we're not going to slip this little guy off as we often do. We're actually going to leave it on there for the first 4 rows. When we work brioche flat, we're going to work the light side, right? You have light side and dark side. Light side is going to be the cream color. Dark side is going to be the blue. You work each side twice. So you work it first in one color, then you work it next in another color. And then you turn your work. So right now, I want to show you, I've just finished my two-color Italian cast on. And if you aren't a little bit careful, you can actually lose this first stitch. So when I turn my work to start it, I'm just going to kind of hold on to those 2 little guys, right? Now, I know I'm starting in the light color because my light color stitch is first, plus your pattern will tell you that. So I have to carefully take my dark color to the back, right? Keep my light color up here, but keep that twist in there so when you come in, you can knit that first stitch. It's ever so slightly tricky, but I know you guys can do it. All right. So this is going to be the light side of my work since I'm working in my light color. So my dark color stitches are the ones that are going to be, get a yarn over or a buddy and are going to be not worked but slipped. So what I'm going to be doing right now is a yarn forward, slip my stitch, yarn over. And then I'm going to knit my next one. This is a setup row, right? I'm going to bring my yarn forward, I'm going to slip my next stitch, my yarn is going to cross over that dark stitch as I knit my next one. I'm going to bring my yarn forward, slip my next stitch, that yarn's going to go over top of the needle so I can knit my next one. I'm not really barking or brioche knitting yet because this is just a setup. I'm going to show this to you in throwing. I'm going to bring my yarn forward, I'm going to slip that next stitch. When I throw, just by leaving my yarn to the front of the work, I create that yarn over that I need. So my yarn's going to be right here. I'm going to go into that next stitch and I'm going to create that yarn over while simultaneously knitting my next one. My yarn needs to come back to the front, slip my next stitch. You're going to notice I'm slipping them purl-wise. Come around and knit that next stitch. Bring my yarn forward, slip the next stitch, and knit the next light one. You will also notice that you are always slipping the dark ones, never working them, and you're only working the light color because we will never work the stitch that's at opposite color. Boom, right there. Let me just switch. I'm going to get to the end of this really fast, and then the magic starts to happen on the next side, or on the second pass of this row. Okay. When I get to that very last stitch, because I know I am working in my light color, I'm actually going to work that very last stitch, which is this one. So I'm just going to knit it. And then my yarn is always going to get dropped to the front of my work. Right now, I'm going to just slip that stitch and keep it on there, that funky little stitch, because I just want to stabilize everything. I'm going to come down to the edge. Now on this first row, when you're sliding back, be a little careful that you're not twisting it because it can get a little bit crazy. Now my first stitch on this side, right, I'm still on my light side, is a light color. I'm only ever going to work these edge stitches in my light color. So right now I'm going to just slip it so it gets out of the way. I've got my dark color in the back, but I'm going to bring it forward. Now you can see that crossed over stitch right there. That is going to be my first burp or my brioche purl. I am going to work those two stitches together purl-wise. Then I have my next little individual stitch, right there. It's all by itself. My individual stitch that is the opposite color of the yarn that I'm working is going to get slipped purl-wise. My yarn is going to come over. Now my next stitch is a purl, so my yarn's going to come all the way around to the front. So this is called a yarn forward, slip one yarn over front, right? And then I'm going to just purl that, brioche purl that next one, or burp that next little set. My yarn's already in the front, so now I'm just slipping one yarning over and burping. My yarn's already in the front, so I'm slipping one, yarning over, and burping. I'm going to go ahead and just switch to throwing so that you guys can see it that way. My yarn's already in the front. I'm slipping that next stitch. I'm coming all the way around the needle. I'm going to go into my next double stitch, and I'm going to burp those two together. So one thing you can kind of think about, aside from the fact that I can't throw well, let me come back around and do that one more time. There we go. Is if you see a stitch all by itself, it needs a buddy, because we're never going to work the individual stitches, except those little selvage edges. We're never going to work the individual stitch. We're going to slip it. We're going to give it a buddy by giving it a yarn over. We're going to then look at the two that are together. We're going to keep them together by burping them. I see my next stitch that's all by itself, so I'm going to give it a buddy, which is a yarn over. And the two that are together, I'm going to keep them together. I'm going to switch back to the way I can do this so it doesn't take me 5 years to finish. I see my next little stitch that's all by itself. It's going to get a buddy. The two that are together are going to stay together. The individual stitch gets a buddy. Two that are together stay together. Right? So if you think about it, the first pass on the light side was a knit. The second pass on the light side is with your dark color in purl. That's because you're going to be seeing columns essentially of knits and purl. Going to get to that last one. That last stitch is my selvage stitch, right? So I'm just going to slip it. Notice that my yarn is in front while I'm slipping it, and I'm going to slip that last little crazy guy that we're not really working yet. Okay, so now I've turned my work, and now I have the dark side facing me. And you can actually see just the very beginning of that is my dark side knit stitch. Now, this little knot that we have on there, that little first one, I'm just going to slide it off. I'm not going to take it out. I'm just going to let it hang there for a second. My first stitch is my light color, right? I'm going to decide which color I'm going to work based on what I'm looking at. The color that is most represented is the dark color, right? I've got two blues, one cream, two blues, one cream. I'm always going to work the color that is the least represented. So on this side, this is my dark side, so I'm going to work my light color in purl. So I'm going to grab my yarn. It does get quite twisty, by the way. I'm going to grab my light colored yarn, and I'm going to that very first stitch. I'm going to bring my yarn forward and purl it. Again, that's just my little selvage stitch, and I'm going to purl it because I'm on the purl side. Then my first stitch in the dark color is all by itself, so I am going to go ahead and give it a wrap. Because I'm going to be brioche purling my light color, I'm going to bring my yarn forward, slip that stitch, yarn over all the way around, and brioche purl that next one. So this is essentially what we did on the last side, just in a different color. Slide that stitch, yarn over, and purl the next two together. Slide the individual stitch, give it its yarn over buddy, and brioche purl the next two together. Again, I will show you really quickly that same thing. Slide that next stitch all the way over, and brioche purl the next two together. My little individual stitch gets a buddy. My two that are together, I think I actually just worked that stitch. I did. Don't do that. It's very tempting, by the way, and you'll find that you'll do that sometimes. Slip that stitch and give that yarn all the way around, but do not work it. And brioche purl those two together, right? Slip that next stitch all the way around, and brioche purl those two together. Okay, I'm going to meet you at the other end of this row. I'm just going to finish right up real quick and show you one more thing. The very end, again, that selvage stitch, you're going to purl. Okay, slide your stitches back, because anytime you see that you have a color on each end, right, then you know you're going to slide back and work it again. Now, this little guy we can finally take out and just let it hang there. We're now stable enough to remove that, that slip knot. Okay, my first stitch is again a light color. Since I have the dark color, I'm not going to work it, so I'm just going to slip that out of the way. I am on the dark side, so I'm going to brioche knit my dark color. I'm going to bring that yarn forward, right? I'm going to give it that single stitch of yarn over, and I'm going to brioche knit the next one. Again, I know I'm working my dark color because my light color is most represented. I know I'm on the dark side because I am brioche knitting the dark color, and that's giving me those columns of knit stitches. Let me just switch real quick to throwing, just for you that need that, or want that for that matter. I'm going to find that little individual stitch. I'm going to bring my yarn forward. I'm leaving it in the front so that I can just brioche knit those two together, slide. That's creating my yarn over. That's all I have to do for it. Yarn forward and slip one. Leave the yarn in the front while I go ahead and take it and knit in the back. Bring the yarn forward again, slip that, enter the stitches of to knit, and brioche knit those two together. When you get to the very last stitch, again, you're in the dark color, so you are not going to work the last stitch. Bring my yarn forward, slip one. Now, my last one is a brioche knit right there, but see how my yarn is in the back of the work? Bring it to the forward and just let it hang there, and then slip that next stitch. Okay. So now, on the light side, you can see you're starting to get some light colored stitches, and on the dark side, you can see you can starting to get some dark colored stitches. And that is the basics of brioche knit flat. And I'm just going to show you one more time. See how my yarn is in all on one side? That's how I know I'm going to start a whole new row of it. And remember to work each side twice, once in each color. Thanks.